Hey, everybody. Hey. I'm so excited about this conversation, y'all. I have been wanting to talk about this topic for a while, but I wanted to make sure that I had the time to really unpack it. And so today we are going to be talking all about people pleasing. I have a heart for if you've been rocking me for a while, I have a heart for women and couples. But this conversation about people pleasing really hits women. It is something that women deal with a lot. And so if it is something you've dealt with publicly, you folks know you deal with people pleasing. Maybe it's something private. I think sometimes the way people pleasing shows up for me may not be as obvious to people, but it's definitely something that I have struggled with, and not normally in the most common ways people pleasing shows up, but I definitely deal with it. And so if this is a conversation that somebody else is going to benefit from, can you go ahead and just hit share or tag them below and tell them they do not want to miss this conversation? I'm going to spend some time with this. So we'll be here for a little bit of time today. And then I'm going to have some time for you just to ask any questions you have about it. If you happen to be catching this on a replay, after I've completed the video, that is okay. I want you to still post your questions. If your question is private, you can DM me. Many of y'all DM me. Y'all know I be in my DMs. And so make sure you DM me if you have a question about it, because I think this is an opportunity for you to get free. Okay. Because over here on my Instagram street, on my Instagram block, we are going to live in freedom. We're going to walk free. We're going to live free. And we're going to live intentionally, fully engaged. And so let's start this conversation. So I like to call this new series Lab Day. Fridays are going to be Lab Day. Why do I call it that? Well, I call the work I do with women and with couples and with my coaching clients and with my clinical clients, I call it getting in the lab. Honey, we are getting in the labs. We're putting on our proverbial lab coats. We're putting on our goggles and we're diving into our lives. We're studying our lives. We're looking at what is working, what isn't working. We are telling ourselves the truth about ourselves. And so I call it getting in the lab. And so Fridays from now on is going to be Lab Day. Thank you, T. One of my besties is on, and she said, all right, Dr. Robin, but we're going to call this Lab Day. Every Friday is going to be Lab Day. And this is when we're going to get in there and do some work. In case you missed it, every Monday, I've started a new series. Every Monday, I'm going to give you a thought to consider, something for you to consider throughout the week. I did that this past Monday. Sometimes our thought to consider is going to be connected to what we talk about on Fridays, and sometimes it won't. This week, it is connected. So every Monday, I'm going to give you a thought to consider. And then on Fridays, we're going to get in the lab. All right. Now, for those of you who are new, you're going to see me looking down at my notes, honey, because I keep notes in front of me. Because I have a little bit of attention deficit, and this mind will have me going down the street and around the corner, and I will completely forget where I am. So I have notes in front of me, and I want to introduce myself to the people who might see this video later on, and you're like, who is this chick? Well, I'm Robin, and I am a licensed therapist. I'm a certified life coach, and often asked to be a keynote speaker. And those things I'm very passionate about. I love helping people clinically. I love helping people through coaching, and I love speaking. And when I'm helping people clinically, or when I'm helping people through coaching, those are similar roles, but they are distinctly different at the same time. So if you want to know more about the difference between counseling and coaching, if you head over to my website, robinmayonline.com, and you click on coaching, if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see a whole podcast that I did with one of my very good friends, Valerie Burton. I actually got trained through her coaching program. We did a whole podcast breaking down the difference between coaching and counseling. So you can check that out. Now, on Monday, we talked about boundaries. We talked about whether or not you set healthy boundaries. That was the question I had for you to consider. Do you set healthy boundaries? And in that conversation, we talked about, are your boundaries rigid? Are they loose, or are they flexible? When we talk about rigid boundaries, often we have rigid boundaries as a sense of protection. And that's not always a bad thing. Particularly if you've experienced some type of trauma, you probably do need to have more rigid boundaries. But the challenge with rigid boundaries is often, and it's so interesting, one of my clients just yesterday, we were unpacking this, because let me tell you something, my girl, she does not play. Her boundaries are very rigid. And what we've talked about is, sis, you're keeping all the bad things out, but your boundaries are so rigid, you're keeping the good stuff out as well. So I ask you to consider, are your boundaries rigid? Are they loose? You just let anything and anybody have access to you. And you wouldn't do that if you truly understood how valuable you are. You wouldn't leave your wallet just sitting around for anybody to access. No, because you know how valuable your wallet is. Well, if your boundaries are loose, I need you to understand you, my dear, you're valuable and everybody should just not have access to you. When I think about my journey, accountability is critically important to me. I do not live my life without accountability. More than likely, there is not going to be any major decision that I make without running it by somebody. But my boundaries are very clear. I don't run it by everybody. I don't open myself up to everybody's opinion. I'm very careful about the people who are in my advisory circle, because everybody cannot get that type of access to me. So I don't want you to have overly rigid boundaries. I don't want you to have overly loose boundaries. I want you to have flexible boundaries. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So people pleasing and boundaries are closely related. People pleasing and boundaries are closely related. So today we're going to talk about people pleasing. Often this is an issue, like I said, that women struggle with. And so what in the world is people pleasing? What am I talking about when I say that? This is a common term that we use, but people pleasing, like if you go see a therapist, they're not going to give you a clinical diagnosis of people pleasing now. People pleasing is often a symptom connected to some other diagnoses, but people pleasing in and of itself is not a diagnosis. But there is, it is a common word used. So for our purposes, I wanted to define people pleasing for our time together. What is people pleasing? So I want you to keep this definition in mind. People pleasing is when you do what pleases or benefits everyone else, often at your own personal expense. So when we talk about people pleasing for our time today, people pleasing is when you do what pleases or benefits everyone else, often at your own expense. Watch this. It is an unbalanced response to attending to the needs of others and neglecting your own needs. We ain't got to talk about anything else, y'all. We can just stop there and deal with that definition. Now, let me tell you, I'm going to share with you the 6 reasons you may be people pleasing. I'm going to share with you 6 questions you need to ask yourself if you deal with any of those issues. And then I'm going to give you 3 or 4 practical tips that you can do starting now to start to eliminate your pattern of people pleasing. So we got a lot to cover, but let me give you that definition again. People pleasing is when you do what pleases or benefits everyone else, often at your own personal expense. It is an unbalanced response to attending to the needs of others and neglecting your own needs. Some of y'all need to just go ahead and say, Amen, Robin. Somebody needs to go ahead and just say, Amen, Robin. You've come down my street. I'm about to come to your house in a minute, but you need to go ahead and say, Robin, amen, you have come down my street. And I'm about to talk to my people of faith because I'm very clear about the people who are drawn to me. I often draw very purposeful women who are driven, who are checking all the boxes, they're crossing all the T's, they're dotting all the I's, they're doing all the things. And often these women are women of faith. And I want to talk to women of faith in particular in a portion of this conversation. I'm going to come on over there on your block, okay? So I just want you to listen to that definition and see where that applies to you. Do you have an unbalanced response to attending to the needs of others? This includes your man, this includes your kids, it includes your boss, it includes your church. Do you have an unbalanced response to attending to the needs of others while neglecting your own needs? I want to say this to you. There is nothing honorable about you serving others to the point of self-neglect. But I know some of my church folks are struggling with that. So I told you what people pleasing is, but what isn't people pleasing? What is the opposite of people pleasing? So watch this. When we talk about people pleasing, this is not simply you being kind. So did I help somebody just then? This is not simply you being kind. This is not you just serving others. And like I said, this is where people of faith struggle. As a woman of faith, watch this. As a woman of faith, I know that I am called to serve others. Watch this. My church lady is going to love this. I know as a woman of faith, I am called to serve others even to the point of self-sacrifice. So I'm going to pause right there because, like I said, some of y'all are new to my Instagram block. Some of y'all ain't been hanging with me up here on Instagram, so you don't know me. So I want to help you understand this. I am unashamedly a woman of faith. I declare, I wave the blood-stained banner of Jesus, baby. It is no question, and I am serious about my relationship with God. And so the work I do is filtered through a lens of faith. Even with my clinical clients, all the clients I work with in therapy, all of them are not necessarily believers, and they know that I am. And I often tell them, listen, while my worldview is filtered through a lens of faith, I want to understand your worldview because I'm not going to project my belief system onto you as I'm helping you navigate your journey. But there's no question, my filter is a filter of faith. And so what I just said a few minutes ago about this, let me get that line to you again because I want you to hear it because I made sure I wrote that down. Watch this. As a woman of faith, I know I'm called to serve others, even to the point of self-sacrifice. And that statement is counter culture. It is counter culture. We live in a culture that is do you, baby. Do what benefits you. Don't worry about everyone else. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. That's what our culture teaches us. And what I just said is counter culture. It is the opposite of what culture teaches us. And all of the do you, do what pleases you, make yourself feel good. All of that is really opposite of what scripture teaches. Listen, if you're not a person of faith, just bear with me just for a little bit. I'm talking to my church girls just for a minute. I'm talking to not the kind of church girls Beyonce was talking about. I'm not talking about those church girls. I'm talking to my church girls who sometimes struggle with this people pleasing. I'm going to come off of that street in just a minute, but just bear with me. So again, do what pleases you, do what feels good. All of that is opposite of what the scripture teaches us. In Romans, we're taught to be a living sacrifice. First John teaches us to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Luke teaches us we are to deny ourselves. So when I talk to people of faith about people pleasing, being unhealthy, they struggle because they're like, no, I'm supposed to serve. I'm supposed to give of myself. I'm supposed to do this even in a way that feels self-sacrificial. And you are. But people pleasing is service taken to a toxic and unhealthy level. All right. So before I leave this faith portion of our conversation, I want you, if you didn't, I want you to go back to the post I made on March 12th. I want you to go back to that post. I want you to read what I wrote and I want you to study those scriptures because in that post, I share with you that Jesus himself demonstrated boundaries. And if Jesus demonstrated boundaries, surely you need to demonstrate some boundaries. In that post, I share with you how Jesus and his apostles were exhausted. They hadn't even eaten. They haven't had a chance to rest. And so Jesus said, listen, y'all, let's go somewhere. Let's go somewhere by ourselves so we can just chill and we can rest. They're headed to go rest. As they're heading to go rest, Jesus sees this crowd of people and his heart was moved with compassion. And so Jesus demonstrated flexible boundaries. See, some of y'all would have said, nope, I said I was going over there, so I'm going over there. I don't care what I see in front of me. That's a rigid boundary. Some of you wouldn't have ever said you were going to go rest because you're just going to do whatever you can for everybody else all the time. That's loose boundaries. Jesus demonstrated flexible boundaries. He said, I'm going to go rest. He's headed to go rest. He sees some people in need. So he says, wait a minute. Y'all, let's take care of these people. They took care of those people. But after they were done taking care of those people, Jesus said, now remember where we were going. We were going to go rest. Let's go rest. And not only did he go rest, he went off by himself and took some time by himself. Sis, you won't take no time by yourself. And that communicates subconsciously, you think you got something that Jesus didn't even have. You think you have the capacity to keep going when Jesus didn't even have that capacity. He said, no, I need to go rest. I know I not only am I in somebody's neighborhood, I am sitting on somebody's living room couch. I am in your living room. I done got myself comfortable and I done got me a cup of coffee because I'm in your business. So often we have to get clear that people pleasing is not the same as serving, and it is not the same as self-sacrificing. This is a level of honoring everybody else to a place that could very well be unhealthy for you. All right, so again, I want y'all to hear this. I want you to write this down because you should be taking some notes, girl. You need to be taking some notes. You need to invite your girlfriend to watch this and y'all can have a discussion about it. You can pull this video up on Zoom and y'all can sit on Zoom and watch this and talk about it. You need to be calling your girl saying, girl, let's go get some coffee so we can unpack this because I'm about to make a big statement. Y'all ready for this? Isn't that a song? I told y'all I get distracted by song. Y'all ready for this? What's that song? Anyway, let me give you this big statement. Watch this. Often, the true motivation of people pleasing is rooted in our own internal messaging. Yeah. I'm going to give it to you again. Often, the true motivation of people pleasing is rooted in our own internal messaging. If you've been over here on Instagram with me for a while, you hear me often talking about, girl, pause and pay attention. Pause and pay attention. What am I wanting you to pause and pay attention to? You, sis. I want you to pay attention to you. I want you to understand why you do what you do. You often hear me say, live intentionally, fully engaged. I want you to understand why you do what you do, why you show up the way you show up. Because when you start to understand it, you can see if it's working. And if it's not working for you, you can begin to make the necessary adjustments. Often we pay more attention to the symptoms than we do the root. And because we're looking so much at the symptom, we're not getting to the root. And so nothing changes for the long term because we've only dealt with the headache. We're not dealing with what's causing the headache. We keep taking Tylenol, but we're not dealing with what we're eating. We're not dealing with the fact that we're not getting enough rest. We're not dealing with that undercurrent of a health issue. And that's what I want you to understand. I want you to understand what is triggering, what is driving what you're doing. Okay, so often the true motivation is rooted in our own internal messaging. So I want to start to unpack for you the 6 reasons you may be struggling with people pleasing. I'm going to give you these 6 reasons. Are you ready? Originally I said 5, but there are 6 reasons you may be struggling with people pleasing. Number 1, you are copying a learned behavior. One of the reasons you may be struggling with people pleasing is that you are copying a learned behavior. Your mama, your grandmama, your cousin, and your sister too. All the women in your family, this is what they did. They worked themselves to death. They were always going. They were always doing. And here's the truth. You highly respect your mother. You highly respect your grandmother. You highly respect your great grandmother. You highly respect your auntie. Yes, I say auntie because I'm from Texas. You highly respect those people and you value them. And so you find yourself doing what they are doing. Remember this. Hear me when I say this. Hear me when I say this. This is if you are married, you want to hear this. If you are single, no matter what, here's a life principle. Watch this. We are either repeating what we saw growing up or we're trying to get as far away from what we saw growing up. And often we're doing a combination of both. We're repeating what we saw growing up. We're trying to get far away from what we saw growing up. And we're often doing a combination of both. And so often we are doing what we saw. And often we're not even doing it intentionally. That's why I'm saying pause and pay attention so that you can get clear about why you are doing what you're doing. Often we're not even doing it intentionally. We're only doing what we always saw. So one of the reasons you may be people pleasing is that you are copying a learned behavior. And watch this. Your mama and them didn't know any better. Nobody taught them any different. So they're only doing what they saw. And you're continuing that pattern. And I'm going to tell you, your mama and your grandmama come to see me for therapy and they're exhausted. They're tired. They don't celebrate how they work themselves to death, but you're continuing in that pattern because you deemed it consciously or subconsciously, you deemed it honorable. but they paid the price. So number one, you are copying a learned behavior. The second reason you may be people pleasing, watch this, you are driven by an emotional longing or an emotional need. You are being driven. What's motivating you to do what you're doing is you are driven by an emotional longing or an emotional need. So what do I mean? We are often desiring something, and because we're desiring that so much, we think the channel through which we're going to receive what we're longing for is through saying yes whenever somebody asks us to do something, doing everything everybody else wants us to do, because we're longing for acceptance. We're longing for support. We're longing for people to see, to have a certain reputation, for people to see us a certain way. Hold on, I gotta make sure I give y'all this one strategy. Hold on, because I don't want to miss this. All right. So we are often having a deeper longing. And so because I don't want them to think that I'm selfish, I don't want them to think that I don't love them, I don't want them to think that I am insensitive, or deep down, I really want to be accepted by them. Deep down, I want them to see me in a certain way. Deep down, I'm really longing for support. And so I feel like if I keep doing this for them, I'm going to get this back. And so you're longing for something. And so that's motivating your people pleasing. So number one, you're copying a learned behavior. Two, you're driven by an emotional longing or need. Number three, watch this. Here's another one for my people of faith. You have an unbalanced spiritual gift. An unbalanced spiritual gift. Again, let me talk to my people of faith a little bit very quickly, because I'm going to use a more spiritual term. And so if you're not a woman of faith, if that's not your jam, just pause for a minute and let me say this to those who are. I want you to consider, when I say an unbalanced spiritual gift, what I really mean is that you haven't consecrated your spiritual gift. You know, when you consecrate something, you set it apart. And so often we have a spiritual gift of either helps, or we have a spiritual gift of hospitality, but we haven't consecrated it. We haven't set it apart for God to use the way He wants to use. It comes so naturally for us. So we do it without even thinking, but we haven't set it apart to say, God, allow me to use this particular spiritual gift in the way you have called me to use it. Because sometimes the way we're helping is really hindering. Sometimes the way we're supporting is really sabotaging, but that's because we're doing it out of our own strength and not out of the leading of God. But that's because it comes so naturally for us. Y'all with me on that? Y'all got that? Okay. So we have an unbalanced spiritual gift. Here's number 4. You have not strengthened your boundaries. So remember, we're talking about people pleasing, and I'm sharing with you the 6 reasons you may be people pleasing. I'm going to share with you these reasons. Then I'm going to give you a question you can ask yourself about each of these reasons. And then I'm going to give you, I think, 5 practical tips you can do. And then I'll open up for questions. All right. So number 4, you have not strengthened your boundaries. You're people pleasing because you haven't strengthened your boundaries. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. Remember, go back to Monday. We talked about boundaries. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about boundaries. We have rigid, loose, or flexible boundaries. It's important that you have boundaries. It is nothing spiritual about not having boundaries. It is not emotionally intelligent when you don't have boundaries. And so you want to make sure you have strengthened your boundaries. Number 5, the 5th reason you may be people pleasing. Watch this. Y'all, this one is so huge. I almost want to do a video just on this by itself. And if I'm honest, I really think this is the primary reason for most of us. To the point where I almost should have left this one at the end, but it's here now. So I'm pausing for dramatic effect, because I want you to really get this. This is the 5th reason you may be people pleasing. Number 5. You have a low tolerance for someone else's response or their reaction. And this often gets me. You have a low tolerance for someone else's response or their reaction. What does that mean? One of the things that I'm intentional about doing in an area of growth that I have to continue to work on. One of the things I spend so much time helping clients do is build up their emotional currency, their emotional capacity, their emotional resilience. So their emotional resilience, their emotional currency, their emotional capacity. And why am I wanting us to build that up? Because often you're people pleasing because you can't emotionally tolerate, you can't handle that person's response or that person's reaction. Often we can't handle how they are going to respond. I don't want them to be upset. What you're really saying is, I can't emotionally handle my mom being upset when I tell her I can't do that. I don't want them to be sad. I can't emotionally, you see how it always comes back to us? Let me go back up here and remind you of what I said. Often the true motivation of our people pleasing is rooted in our own internal messaging. So we really think it's about everybody else, but really people pleasing is really about us. I don't want my child to be sad. I can't tolerate them being sad. Let me tell you, I hope my daughters don't see this. I'm going to put myself out here. I hope they don't see this. I only have one daughter that's on Instagram. There are times, I'm just being vulnerable. I share my crazy so you don't have to share yours. There are times that I give into things because I can't tolerate, I don't have the capacity for them to be walking around with their mouth stuck out. It changes the spirit of the home. And I don't feel like dealing with that. Okay, yes, go ahead, right? So don't judge me, because see, that might be my issue, but you got your own issues. So that's what happens with judgment. See, some of y'all are like, what? Honey, don't judge me, because you got your own stuff, right? And so sometimes I can't tolerate that. I don't feel like dealing with that, so I give into it, right? So we can't tolerate their response. I don't want them to be disappointed. And I mean, because really, I don't want them to feel some kind of way about me. So often we have a hard time with people pleasing because we can't tolerate the other person's response or their reaction. I should do a whole video just on that one. And here's the sixth reason we often struggle with people pleasing. Remember, 6 reasons. You are driven by guilt or some other distressing emotion. Often you continue to people please because you feel guilty, or you feel sad. But I want to give another feeling other than sad. Often it's guilt. You feel shame. You feel afraid. So we're driven by some distressing feeling. It's a lot when I talked about not tolerating what others feel, but often we can't tolerate our own feelings. So hear me. A distressing feeling doesn't always mean you're not doing what's right. I worked with a client today who made a big life decision, and she's feeling really guilty. And I'm going to stop here and say this. She made a very big life decision and she's feeling really, really guilty. And that's why I'm challenging clients about the words they speak. You may think it's not a big deal. One of my girlfriends gets so sick of me because I don't like when I or the people close to me say things like because girl, I have to go. I always correct them and I correct myself. No, you don't have to do anything. And I know it may sound like nuance, but no, we want to live with intention. We want to live intentionally. So that means, no, I am deciding to go do this. Nobody's making me do this. Even when you say, girl, I got to go to work tomorrow. I know that's just what we say, but no, you don't have to. You're choosing to go to work because you don't want to deal with the consequences of what happens if you don't. There are plenty of people who don't go to work. Why am I saying this? She's feeling very distressed about a decision she made. But her words were very careful, were very intentional, or very concerning. And so I had to redirect her messaging because it's giving her a message. She said, how can I say this without breaking confidence? She said, I feel guilty because I made this decision so that I could be happy, but it's making that person sad. No. We had to redirect that. No, you're making a decision as a response to behavior. That's different. And so she felt guilty. And so I'm often trying to help clients understand That guilt you feel guilty, but that doesn't, we need to unpack the guilt later. That distressing feeling doesn't mean that you're not doing what you're supposed to do, right? Okay. So I know we got to wrap up. I've been on here already for, I think, 30 minutes. Let's wrap up. So I'm going to give you all six again. Why are you people pleasing? Number one, you're copying a learned behavior. Two, you are driven by an emotional longing or need. Three, you have an unbalanced spiritual gift. Remember, to my people of faith, that word really should be an unconsecrated spiritual gift. You have not strengthened your boundaries. You have a low tolerance for someone else's response or reaction. And then number seven, you're driven by guilt or some other distressing feelings. So what do we do? I'm going to give you 6 questions. I'm going to give you one question for each of those. Here are questions you can ask yourself. Y'all get a journal. Spend some time. Use this as your quiet time, your reflection time. Get a journal and ask yourself these questions. Question number one, you are copying a learned behavior. Why do you struggle with people pleasing? You're copying a learned behavior. Ask yourself, what did I see growing up that's influencing how I'm showing up? What did I see growing up that's influencing how I showed up? Number two, you're driven by an emotional longing or need. Ask yourself, what am I feeling in this moment, and where does this feeling come from? It's really whatever thoughts you're thinking. What am I feeling in this moment, and where is this feeling coming from? Number three, you have an unbalanced spiritual gift. Ask yourself, what is my passion, and how is my passion not aligned with what I'm doing? What is my passion, and how is my passion not aligned with what I'm doing? Number four, you have not strengthened your boundaries. Ask yourself, why shouldn't I set boundaries when Jesus did? Why should I not set boundaries when Jesus did? Number five, you have a low tolerance for someone else's response. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen? Girl, that's such a powerful, when you get clear about what am I really afraid would happen, it's going to give you so much information. And then number six, you are driven by guilt. Ask yourself, what am I telling myself about what I feel? What are you telling yourself about that guilt? What are you telling yourself about that shame? All right. All right, y'all, I can't, if you have any questions, I'm going to need you to post them quickly because I got to go get my kids. So I need you to post them quickly, and I can't really see the comments. So make sure if you have a question, you start putting them now, because I'm going to give you 5 practical steps, 5 practical things you can do right away to start. You're driving down the road of people pleasing. You're ready to take an exit. Here are 5 things you can do to get off that highway. Number one, before you say yes, just pause. Before I even give you these 5 reasons, let me pause. One of the first things that's not even on this, I'm going to make it six things you can do. I gave you 6 practical steps. I'm going to give you I gave you 6 reasons you may be people pleasing. Let me give you 6 practical things you can do different. So the first one, instead of the one I just told you, the first one is just pause and pay attention. Y'all know that's my swan song. Pause and pay attention. I often tell clients that I'm working with, don't do nothing different. Don't do anything different. Just pay attention to what you're doing. Because often, if we can just pay attention to what we're doing, we'll get so much information. So literally, girl, get you again, I love journaling. Get you a journal, use your note app, and just pay attention to how often you are saying yes or doing something you really don't want to do. Now, remember, we're not talking about just being self-sacrificial. That's part of what we do as people of faith. But when are you recognizing this is getting unhealthy? Just number one, pay attention. Number two, before you say yes or do whatever that thing is that you really don't want to do, I just want you to take a moment to pause. Just tell the person, hey, let me get right back with you. You may still say yes. That's okay. We're on the journey of change. We're in the process of change. You may still say yes, but just say, let me give you 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes, or I'm going to get right back with you. Just practice pausing before you say yes. Even if you end up saying yes, it will train you to give yourself a chance to consider if this is what you need to do. Number 3, I want you to take an assessment, particularly when I talked about which one? One of them in particular made me really want you to do. Oh, when I talked about you are driven by an emotional longing or need. I really want you to take an emotional needs assessment. In relationships, when I work with couples are always talking about your love language, and I love love languages, but I love emotional needs even more because your emotional needs show up in a lot of relationships. And so I want you to take an emotional needs assessment, a personality assessment, and a spiritual gift assessment, because this is going to give you more information about how you show up. Remember, I'm going to come to this in a minute, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself. So take an assessment, a personality assessment, an emotional needs assessment, and a spiritual gifts assessment. These are practical steps you can take to get off of the highway of people pleasing. Number 4, be open to accountability. Invite people, not everybody. Specify some specific people that you are going to be accountable to, that you're going to process what you're doing and why you're showing up the way you need to, the way you do, not the way you need to. Because the people in your life can see things about you that you can't see. So, like I told you, I am very open to accountability. I'm just very specific about the people I go to, not people who are going to tell me what I want to hear. I'm very clear at this stage of my life. I want real relationships. I want relationships where I can tell them the truth and they can tell me the truth. So I don't build my life with people who are just going to tell me what I want to hear. I build my life with people who are going to be really honest with me and tell me what I need to hear. And they can see things that I can't see. And so when I'm getting ready to make a decision, they'll say to me, girl, now, Robin, because sometimes you fill in the blank. So make sure you're open to accountability. Number 5, get very clear on your values. What do you value? What is important to you? Because values serve as blinders. So I know very clearly what are my key values in my life, and they serve as blinders. So this over here may be important, but it's not as important as these things are right here. And so my values keep me from being distracted. So get clear about your values. And then number 6, get a PhD in you. That's just what I call it. Get a PhD in you. What do I mean by that? Girl, you have to really understand you, why you do what you do, why you show up the way you show up, why this triggers you, why that doesn't trigger you. You gotta understand you. So for those of you who want more information on how you do that, I have a mini course available right now. It's called the 7 Steps to Life, and you can invest in that. And it's going to take you through some exercises to help you get real clear about you, to help you understand your personal dysfunctional pattern, to help you understand your values, to help you understand your cognitive distortions, to help you understand what matters to you, to help you understand what winning looks like for you. You can invest in this course, this mini course actually, and it'll help answer a lot of these questions. But even if you don't do that, you can just rewind this video, start from the beginning, stop it when go ahead and say, girl, go ahead and hit save right now. If you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and hit save right now. Save this video and keep coming back to it. If it helped you, share it with somebody, honey. Listen, freed women, free women. We don't stay free and just stay free by ourselves. We help other sisters get free. All right, y'all, that's it. Do y'all have any questions for me? I'm going to wait a few minutes before I wrap up. Do y'all have any questions for me? Is there anything that I talked about that stood out? I'm going to wait a few minutes and then I'm going to get out of here. All right, so if you don't have any questions, make sure I'm going to post this video and I'm going to be in the comments. And so make sure you comment. Let me know your biggest takeaway. Let me give you those 6 reasons again. If this helped you, make sure you share. It's going to help other people get free. So number 1, you are copying a learned behavior. Number 2, you are driven by an emotional longing or need. Number 3, you have an unbalanced spiritual gift. Number 4, you have not strengthened your boundaries. Number 5, you have low tolerance for someone else's response or reaction. Number 6, you are driven by guilt or some other distressing emotion. Thank you, Dr. B. I am so glad that this helped you. All right, guys, make sure you comment or DM me, and I will be here to help you navigate this journey. I'll talk to you soon.